Om Shanti. A warm welcome to everyone to the Brahma Kumari Center, Calgary. During this session, we will be communicating through the live chat. If you're unable to access the chat, please log into your Gmail account and the chat box will appear on the right side of your screen. If you're having any other difficulties, if you're not able to hear us, please let us know in the chat and one of us will be here to assist you. So, since past few months, we have been focusing on self-care, improving qualities of everyday life. We have so far explored several virtues that are very important in our lives. Every week, we pick a specific virtue and we discuss how we can acquire that virtue in our life. That would in turn make our life easy and simple. Last week we discussed how important optimism is in our life, especially during current times when we're in the middle of a pandemic and all we hear is news about people dying and due to COVID. It's the first thing we hear when we wake up in the morning. And every news channel is talking about how fast it's spreading and how many variants there are and so on. As we discussed last week, one way that would help us get through this time and that would help us stay at peace and be happy would be if we come together as a society and change our way of thinking. By changing our way of thinking, we will be able to declutter our minds of negative thoughts and in turn live our life with peace, happiness, and love. But before we start discussing today's topic, I want to share an important quote with everyone, which is make room for everything that matters by removing everything that doesn't. I personally live by this quote on a daily basis because our physical surroundings directly affect the way we think. I'm sure most of us have this workspace around our house where we go when we need to focus on our work or where we go when we need to sit with ourselves and just relax. So this could be, our study table or like a corner in our house with our plants or even by the window where we just sit and stare at the sky. But regardless, we don't overcrowd the space ever. It's because most of us feel that a serene space is required for our sanity. However, if this place was messy or filled with all the clutter, what would it do to us? Would it provide us peace? Would we be able to focus? Probably not. Can you imagine coming home from work, tired, and then all you see is messy house. Your sink is filled with dishes. There's clothes everywhere. Would you feel relaxed looking at all the mess? Or would you feel calm? Or would you feel exhausted? You'd probably feel even more exhausted looking at the mess. So, but imagine having clean countertops and empty sinks, clothes put away, an empty desk to sit on. How would that affect your mental state? Even the thought of it makes you feel at calm. But the world that we live in doesn't always meet our need for simplicity. There are many products available for us than ever before. There are lots of choices for everything, whether it be clothes, whether it be furniture, or even our food. For instance, when we go shopping for even a small thing such as a tablecloth, you're provided with so many choices, so many patterns, so many designs. And all they do is confuse you even more. And regardless of the choices, we're always unhappy when we come back after shopping. We're never content. I was looking at the current findings that said in 1950s, supermarkets had 3,000 products as compared to 1990s that went up to 30,000 products. Now, if you were to imagine your grandparents' house, what is the first thing that sticks with you? It's how clean it was, how everything was just in place, how simple it was. But that's almost impossible to achieve now, and it's no more the ideal. And even if it is, it's so hard to get to that level because we're accumulating more than ever before. Our houses are filled with so much stuff. They're filled with cheap toys, so many clothes, and electronics. As a result, there's no space in our house. Even our garage has become part of our storage space. It's because we're always told that more equals better, which is equal to a happier and more fulfilling life. So today's virtue of discussion is simplicity. So before we move into this topic, I want to ask a question, which is, what does simplicity mean to you? Or what does having a simple life or living a simple life mean to you? So I'll give you guys a moment to think, reflect on what simplicity means to you in general. Okay, coming back. So a simple life has a different meaning and a different value for every person. But simplicity is often mistaken as dullness. It can be associated with lack of color or lack of variety in life. So we try and add all that color so we can make ourselves and things around us more attractive and more impressive. However, in the process, we take ourselves away from our original nature. But we must understand, to be simple is to be like a seed, which is simple yet full. It is to be closer to your true nature and the true being. For me, living a simple life means stripping away non-essentials and focusing energy on things that matter the most, or spending time doing things that are important to me. It means getting rid of many of the things you don't need so you can spend time with people that you love or do things that you love. It means getting rid of all the clutter so you're left with only things that you value. So if we were to look at our wardrobes today, we will find so many non-essential things. There are many clothes that we've bought, but they've been sitting in our closet ever since. And When it comes to deciding our outfit in the morning, it takes us hours to decide on what we want to wear. Some of us will agree that because it takes us so much longer, we have to pick our outfit the night before. And despite having all these choices, we still complain that we don't have enough. It's because our focus has always been to collect more in life. This is because we always believe that having more will provide us with more happiness and peace. And now, if we were to focus more on decluttering our closet and only keeping the pieces that we really need, first we would save so much energy and we would save so much money. In the morning, we won't have to spend hours deciding our outfits. Having fewer possessions and commitments helps us make our life less cluttered. However, getting to that simplicity isn't always an easy process. There have been times when I've decided to declutter my closet. Every time I stand in front of my closet with a firm mindset to declutter it this time, to throw away the pieces that I don't need, I go through them one by one. But every time I look at every piece, my mind tricks me and it makes an excuse that I might need that piece of clothing. Sometimes I say that it's brand new, so I shouldn't throw it away. Sometimes I say that it was a present, so I shouldn't throw it away. Or sometimes I even make an excuse that I will start wearing it more often. And in the process of my mind trying to convince me, I don't get rid of anything over again, and I continue to retain all that clutter. And the same goes for our relationships. We tend to hold on to every relationship, whether it be with our peers, with our colleagues, with our friends. We have cluttered our life with all these relationships, despite of them maybe taking away our peace and happiness. We hold on to them because we're scared of letting go. And in the process of maintaining those relationships, we make them even more complicated. But only if we chose to let go at the right time, they would not only give us time to grow, but they would also make our life so much more simpler and easier to live. So this reminds me of a little story that I want to share with everyone. So once upon a time, there was a shepherd boy tending his sheep on the side of a mountain. One day, as he cared for his sheep, he saw at his feet a beautiful flower, one that was more beautiful than he had ever seen in his life. He knelt and scooped that flower in his hands and held it very close to his eyes. He then held it very close to his face when suddenly he heard a noise. As he looked up, he saw a great stone mountain opening right before his eyes. And as the sun began to shine on the inside of the mountain, he saw sprinkling beautiful gems and precious metals. With the flower in his hand, he walked inside. Laying the flower down, he began to gather all the gold and silver and precious gems in his arms. Finally, with all that his arms could carry, he turned and began to walk out when suddenly a voice said to him, "Don't forget the best." Thinking that perhaps he overlooked some pieces of treasure, he turned around again and picked up additional pieces. And with his arms literally overflowing with wealth, he turned to walk back out of the great mountain. And again the voice said, "Don't forget the best." But by the time his arms were filled, he walked outside, and suddenly the precious metals and stones turned to dust. And when by the time he looked around, the mountain doors were closing. A third time, he heard the voice. And this time, the voice said, "You forgot the best, for the flower is the key to the walls of the mountain." In the story, the shepherd was so busy collecting the clutter that he forgot the things that were most valuable. He went on collecting all the jewels, all the precious jewels and gold and silver that might bring him money and maybe a little happiness for a single moment. But he forgot that simple yet beautiful flower that brought a smile to his face. Now that we've discussed what simplicity and decluttering is, I want to clarify that when I mention simplicity, it's not about sacrifice. And it's not about what you wear or even how you live. And it's definitely not limited to your outer environment. But when I talk about simplicity, it is important to remember that simplicity is all about decluttering our brains of all the waste thoughts and negative thoughts. It's about bringing that optimism in our lives. As we talked about it last week, it is important to understand the importance of positive thoughts. We explored how most of our thoughts we get throughout the day are waste thoughts and negative thoughts. We get very minimal positive thoughts throughout the day. And to have a simple life, we need to declutter our brains from all these excess thoughts that waste so much of our energy. As they say, high thinking and simple living are important because our thoughts directly affect the way we feel. So let's take a moment to reflect on the type of thoughts that we get every day. So there are 4 different types. And these thoughts are directly influenced by what we hear, what we see, what we watch throughout the day. And based on what we watch or see or hear, our thoughts could be positive, they could be negative thoughts, we could get wasteful thoughts, or we could get necessary thoughts. So positive thoughts are the ones that are filled with hope and they're filled with happiness. It's when you wish for something good to happen for someone or even for yourself. For example, when I was crossing the road the other day and I saw an elderly man crossing the road with his big grocery bags. So the first thought that came to my mind was to go and help him. This thought was full of selflessness, and it was only filled with purity and positivity. And the second type of thoughts that we get in a day are negative thoughts. These are harmful for our mind and our health. They deplete our energy, and they're filled with the energy of fear, anger, arrogance, and jealousy. It could be our thoughts about criticizing other people or even ourselves. So, like, if you get in a fight with someone, that fight only lasts for maybe a minute or two. But then the whole day you spend criticizing that person in your head. You keep on thinking about the situation over and over again, creating all the negative thoughts. Now, third type of thoughts are wasteful thoughts. These include thoughts about past or the future, us worrying about what happened in the past, and us thinking how we could have changed a specific situation, or worrying about the future. Maybe, worrying about getting um admitted to a good college that you might have wanted to go to. So, like, creating all these wasteful thoughts about future events or past events. And third type is necessary thoughts. And these include about your responsibility, your day-to-day things that you need to do. Now, if it is our responsibility to recognize what kind of thoughts we are getting. If we're getting constant negative thoughts, we must recognize them and replace them with something positive or more optimistic. This will not only help us calm our mind, but also declutter it when it is continuously running in every direction possible. Because living a simple life means having the ability to organize our thoughts. That will help us get a clear picture of the future or where our life is heading. I remember past week I misplaced some of my papers, and in the rush I looked for them everywhere, under the table, on my chair, in my bag, and I couldn't find them anywhere until 2 days later when I was sitting in my bed and I knew exactly where I left the papers. So when our mind is decluttered, it makes our life so much simpler. Everything automatically works out, and it starts to fall in place. But sometimes, without knowing, we start to complicate things for ourselves and get in a cycle of overthinking. And this overthinking fills our mind with all the wasteful thoughts, negative thoughts. For instance, nowadays everyone is very conscious about their health. When we experience some sort of pain or a symptom that is very unusual for our health, what is the first thing that we do? I'm sure all of us have experienced this, and we all have an answer to this as well. First thing that we do is search up our symptoms on Google. We go through every single website possible without paying attention to the credibility of that website. And with all the false information that we collect, we sometimes turn a minor headache into some sort of tumor, or sometimes we turn like a minor heartburn into a heart attack. We blindly believe in what we read, and in literally a minute or two, we diagnose ourselves with who knows what. And in a state of panic, we overcomplicate things for ourselves. And only if, in the same situation, we had properly thought through what was going on and what was happening and talked to someone knowledgeable, instead of relying on random website, we would have been able to properly solve the problem without entering the panic mode. Consulting a doctor in that case would have provided with right information and factual information and stopped us from overcomplicating that situation. Similarly, we overcomplicate every aspect of our life by relying on false information that we collect from random websites or even from people around us. For instance, when the whole pandemic started, everyone went on buying toilet papers. It probably started off with one person, that was followed by another person and then another, until everyone just went crazy stocking toilet papers without having any relevance to the pandemic. Or even online apps that have millions of posts that advertise false information. So it is our responsibility to be aware and to differentiate between what is true and what is necessary and between what is false. Because this information is what clutters our mind. It creates unnecessary fear and worry. For instance, there are thousands of posts and that share wrong information about health, random health facts, or even about COVID. Nowadays, there's so much false information about COVID vaccines or like side effects of COVID vaccines. So, getting all this information from these random sources clutters our brains. And when our mind is cluttered, it reflects on how we deal with those situations, we find them. So, now that we've discussed the meaning of simplicity, I want everyone to reflect on what are some benefits of living a simple life. So I'll give you a moment to think about, like, why is living a simple life important, or what are some benefits that come with it? Mhm. Okay. Yeah. So, like, living a simple life basically strengthens us emotionally and physically by focusing on what's more important. Our stress level decreases, right? You're not thinking about those million things. You're just thinking about that one thing. And we all know stress is one of the number one causes of any health condition. It affects our mental health. It leads to some people going into depression and all. And it also affects our physical health. People who live a simple life focus on their health and watch carefully what they put into their bodies. And it's not just about food, it's also the information that they put in their bodies every day, whether it be, watching news in the morning or watching some kind of crime series late at night. For example, as the older generation moves towards their retirement, they tend to lean more towards a simple lifestyle. A lot of people move to more scenic locations once they have retired. They move away from the complex life that requires them to be up on their feet all the time. And they're more focused on a minimalistic lifestyle that requires them to relax a little bit more and that gives them time to do self-care. And this simple lifestyle allows them to take care of their physical health, their mental health, and their emotional health. Now, second benefit of living a simple life is that your relationships become deeper and more meaningful. You might choose to have fewer friends, but the friends that you have are much closer. I'm sure most of us have experienced this transition from elementary school to high school to university. We all started off with big groups of friends where we were literally friends with everyone in the classroom. And then, and then we moved to high school. That friend group became smaller until, get to university. And you're only left with 2 or 3 people that you really trust. And we keep in touch with these people because these relationships are so much more meaningful. You share so much more with them, and it's so easy and it's so simple to be in these. You are not required to change yourself. You can be yourself when you're in these relationships. And thirdly, simplicity allows us to be true to ourselves and our values. So today's society focuses on materialistic things, and that doesn't necessarily lead to happiness and fulfillment. And these material things don't guarantee happiness. In fact, they lead us to long for even more. When you get to a certain level, you're always thinking about how you can get to an even higher level, whether it be in your job posting or whether it be when you're in school and you get a certain grade and you're only looking for how you can get to a higher level. So a complex life with a lot of expenses has made plenty of people miserable. For example, people have multiple loans to pay, whether it be for their houses, whether it be for their expensive cars. It's only when you embrace simplicity is that you're no longer influenced by materialistic things. You can follow your own conscience without concern for appearance. For example, when you were younger, life was so much simpler. There was no worries about the past or the future. You never see a 5-year-old worrying about things they want to achieve in the future or worrying about having a big car or a big house in the future. They're happy regardless of these things. Happiness to them is playing with their friends and spending more time with their loved ones. They don't have any grudges, negativity, or dishonesty. They're always content with what they have in the present moment. It's because their thinking is so simple that they're not bothered by anything or anyone. So, knowing how simplicity can help us live a better life, what are some steps that we can take on regular basis that would help us live a simple life? You guys can feel free to share your ideas in the chat if you. Okay, so the first step is always to identify what's more important to you, listing those top 4 or 5 things that value the most to you. Asking yourself questions. What makes me happy? Is it owning a big car or a big house or having a dream job? Or is it spending quality time with people that you love? Or asking yourself, what do I look forward to? You know, is it going to work? Is it spending time with family again? Or is it, spending time with friends going hiking? Or what do I want more in my life? Do I want to spend more time working? Do I want to spend more time staying at home? Or asking, what do I want less of? So, asking these questions, making these choices is what will help us live and experience a simple life. As we discussed earlier, sometimes we mistake more for better. And at the end of the day, prioritizing between what is important is what will bring us happiness. Nowadays, we're working every day or in a rush to earn money so we can have big houses and big cars in the future or go on like a dream holiday in the future. But all these things might bring us comfort for a few seconds or a few days, but they never bring us happiness. Because happiness lies in simplicity. So imagine a person who is working at the highest position in his company that pays him well. He's working 12 plus hours a day and are always rushing from one meeting to the other. They're constantly trying to get to an even higher position. And with all the money, they're able to afford a car or they're able to afford their dream house and they're able to go for their dream vacation. But in all this hustle, they don't have enough time for their family. And now there is a second person who is living a much simpler life. works a job that pays them well, has enough time for their family, they're honest, and they're content with what they have. They don't have their dream house or their dream car, but they're still living comfortably. And when they come home from work, they have enough time to spend with people they love. And most importantly, they have enough time for themselves. In these two scenarios, it is very evident whose life is simpler and is less stressing, and whose life is more fulfilling. Now that we have reflected on these two scenarios, can we reflect back on our own lives and see which scenario fits our life? Is it the first scenario where we're always busy with work, or is it the second scenario where our life is balanced between our work life and our home life with our family? So take a minute to reflect which life you're actually living. So I'm sure most of us will agree that we unfortunately fit in the first scenario. We unconsciously consciously decide most to dedicate most of our life to our work. And most of our lives they revolve around our work. From the time we go to work until the time we sleep, we're constantly thinking about work. Even when we get home, we're constantly thinking about what happened at work, what happened with our colleagues, and what you could have done differently at work, or what you can do in the future. We're living This life is so unbalanced and complicated that we're unable to find time for ourselves and our loved ones. But prioritizing what is more important will help us live that simple and relaxed life that we all thrive to live. And having this balance and simplicity in our life is what is going to bring us true contentment. Now, the second step to having a simple life and decluttering our brain is by paying close attention to our thoughts. If we're, like we said, we get around 4 types of thoughts every day. So paying close attention to if we're getting wasteful thoughts, if we're getting negative thoughts. We need to sit with ourselves and replace them with all those wasteful and negative thoughts, or change their direction to something positive. However, this process requires a lot of patience. We need to sit with ourselves and start talking to ourselves. Every day we go around, anyone we meet, our first question to them is, "How are you feeling today?" or "How are you?" But why don't we ask that question to ourselves? We never talk to ourselves. Suppose a child comes home from school and he or she is not feeling the best, and they tell their mom that they didn't have the best day today. What would their mother do immediately? Would she ignore her child and go back to working? Probably not. She would immediately stop working, and her first and her only priority would be her child. She's not going to think about what her friends are thinking about. She's not going to think about any of her kitchen work. The mother would probably ask the child what happened, why it happened, and so on, until she is able to help her child solve that problem. Therefore, we need to sit with ourselves, talk to ourselves, and ask these questions. We need to see if the thoughts we're getting are cluttering our mind. If so, we need to put a stop and replace those thoughts with something positive. Having control over our thoughts will help us achieve that state of calmness and live a simple life. We come home from work and you feel burdened and flushed. And you don't always know why. Whenever I come back from work, that's a regular response, that you feel burdened. And when you sit with yourself, you go through what happened during your day. It's only when that's when you realize that nothing crazy happened. It's all your thoughts that are making your brain cluttered and making you burdened. So it's important to reflect on those thoughts, because once you recognize that it's your thoughts that are making your brain cluttered and are making your life more complicated, it would be so much easier to replace them. But once you don't even know that it's your thoughts, how will you change them? So the third way to experience a simple life is by consuming only information that is right for us. We also tend to complicate our life by consuming all the information in the world, because we believe that learning all the information will help us prove ourselves, or it'll help us prove that we're smarter. Nowadays, people try to gain as much information as possible about every single field. It might help us build a good standard in the society, but at the same time, it's cluttering our head with all the unnecessary information. But that's when we do stuff consciously. There are also times when we are unconsciously cluttering our minds with all the information, whether it be, us sitting around when the TV's on and there's random news channel on and they're talking about some disasters that are happening around the world, or even about COVID nowadays. So despite of us not paying attention, we're still consuming the information. And without knowing, it's constantly cluttering our brain. But it's necessary that we pay attention of what we are consuming. But because again, the type of information that we consume directly affect the kind of thoughts that we get throughout the day. And in turn, it does affect the way we feel. So living to have a simple life is to pay close attention to what we are consuming. Om Shanti.